Also, I want to specify for clarity here that any contents of this webinar is not legal advice as we are not attorneys. And now I'll quickly give a small introduction for myself. Like I mentioned, my name is Anuradha and I'm your host for this webinar. And I am an HR sales consultant working with Be the Change HR. I have around 17 years of work experience in very diverse roles: recruiting, market research, human resources, real estate, entrepreneurship. I'm also a current New Jersey real estate license holder. I enjoy multitasking, continuous learning. Food is a big part of my life, and I love spending time with my family. And I would now request my colleague and the speaker of this presentation, Christina, to take over. Christina, over to you, please.
Thank you, Anu. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. Again, my name is Cristina Gutierrez. I'm an HR pro with Be the Change HR. A little bit about me. I've been in human resources for now a little over 17 years. I've worked in a various number of industries, just to name a few that are close to my heart: nonprofits, hospitality, and sports entertainment. Fun fact about me, I started in food and beverage operations because I loved food. And I realized very quickly I was better with people than actually serving food and cooking. I am better at my cooking now than I was before. I'm very excited to be sharing all this information with you today. So we're going to jump right into the agenda. So today we're going to be talking about all things pay transparency and understanding the legal landscape. So we're going to be covering a number of states, but don't feel overwhelmed. We're going to share a number of resources with you as well. We're going to talk about how to prepare and implement for all things changes around transparency pay, practical steps that you can take right away, and of course, sharing some tidbits and tips along the way as well. So let's talk first of how we got here, because this didn't just happen overnight. I wanted to give you a little bit of a historical piece of how transparency pay came about. First, we started with pay secrecy policies. So for many years and circumstances, federal and state laws have prohibited employers from adopting policies that restrict employees' ability to share policies information about their salary. So we weren't able as employers to tell Christina, for example, not to share data, but I will say it was very cultural and accepted to not speak about pay. That is no longer the case, and we're going to be talking about that throughout the presentation as well. Then came salary history bans. So what does that mean? So many states and local governments had also passed laws prohibiting employers from considering candidates' salary history when making hiring or even compensation decisions about their role overall. And one more. So pay data reporting. So the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission, or mostly known as the EEOC, formally required employers to report data on EEO-1 filings. So think about those reports that some of you've seen where you submit number of positions by rate of pay, title, what have you, also known as Component 2. So although this requirement no longer really applies on the federal side, there are a number of states, including, surprise, surprise, California and Illinois. They've enacted their own pay data reporting requirements as well. And lastly, pay range disclosure laws. Now we're here in present day. So in the latest efforts to address unequal pay, several states and local jurisdictions, so this is key, not only is it state requirements, but there are certain local jurisdictions within a number of states that have their own transparency laws. They basically created a law that requires employers to disclose wage or wage ranges to prospective candidates and or current employees. So depending on the law, so disclosure can include upon request or in certain circumstances post-hire as well. So let's talk a little bit about what is pay transparency. I'm sure a lot of you have heard about the Pay Transparency Act. This is something that's been all over the news within California and other items as well. So let's talk about what it is for you when it comes to pay transparency. So when employers openly share pay ranges about a position or a specific role, that is pay transparency. This can be for current employees, but it can also apply to applicants coming in as potential new hires. So now, depending on the state you live in, sharing certain information may be a requirement, and this is where compliance is a need. So here's something important. When we see multiple states creating laws, we're not too far away from either having other states adopt it and or even having it become federal law in the near future. So even if pay transparency doesn't apply to you now as an entrepreneur, a business owner, or a leader within a company, it is ideal to bring it into fruition and prepare for it before it becomes mandatory. So this is where that proactivity versus reactivity really comes into play. But here's the real benefit to pay transparency. It's not just about compliance, and I don't want to talk about the mushy-gushy stuff, but it really gives your employees, both current and future, clarity on why they're earning their current salary and a clear understanding of total compensation. The kind that builds trust and engagement across the organization. And guess what happens? It decreases turnover and increases engagement as well. So we wanted to give you a little side map of what states are impacted by, or not impacted, have transparency pay laws. Currently, we have 15 states that have adopted a number of different forms of pay transparency. So I'm going to show you a breakdown of the different states, but I don't want you to get overwhelmed because this is not about you memorizing all the things or all the states, but just understanding that there's differences depending on where you're located. So I just wanted to highlight a couple examples. So for California, covered employers are anyone who has 15 or more employees. There is a requirement to post, meaning that you have to have your postings meet these requirements as well. And then obviously under requirements, it's pay range in any job posting provided to the applicant upon reasonable request, and also provide ranges for employees within a position. Now let's talk about another state that's a little different, Connecticut. So this is covered employers, anyone with one employee or more. And pay range requirement for posting? No, but you do have to disclose pay range to applicants upon request or before making an offer of compensation, whichever is earlier. So we just wanted to highlight a few different examples because as you see, different states have different requirements, but the best rule of thumb that I want to give you, and this is just a little bit of a tip, have the posting have at least a range that is realistic and reasonable for your organization, and also make sure to make this available to the employees. And we'll talk about how to implement that throughout the presentation as well. Sorry, I just wanted to show you a couple more examples, quickly go through these. So why should you care? So number one, it is the law. Penalties can be significant and large, which is not ideal. And this is not to scare you. This is to prevent challenges, including fines, to coming into play. Two, it can increase the number of qualified applicants that you can attract more potentially higher percentage of any potential racial or gender gap that you may have that you may not even be aware of. I just wanted to share a little bit of statistics with you. According to Pew Research Center, the gender gap has barely moved in the past 20 years. So in 2022, American women earned about 82 cents of every dollar compared to men. And in 2022, that was 80 cents to the dollar, so barely even moved. So this is an opportunity to, again, continue to close that gap, but also attract more qualified applicants on a diverse, which of course increases your potential to make better decisions, have a wide variety of options, all that jazz. The disparity increases dramatically when race is considered. This is just to give you an example. Hispanic women only earn about 70% as much as white men. Historically, pay increases have only been focused around 3 to 5%, and most employees needed to leave a job in order to get a pay increase. So let's just pause as business owners, leaders, entrepreneurs, to lose someone that you've invested a significant amount of time in, for them to simply get an increase when it's going to cost you so much more to find a new person that you're still going to have to pay them higher to remain competitive, retrain them, which is an average of $15,000, and that's on the low end, to retrain them and onboard them. And it's best to keep them. That's why it's super important to make sure that your rates are competitive and they're, again, being clear to your employees. This is why the law exists, to close those pay gaps, but also to support employers on maintaining talent. You can no longer base current pay on what the person made in previous years either, but rather based on budget and market value, which is what we should be doing as leaders. So what do you do now? This is a lot of information and we want to make sure what's a realistic first step in the process. So if you haven't already, start sharing your pay ranges. The goal is to start working towards a specific piece. To get started, there's a few questions that you can ask yourself. So do you have established pay ranges? So have you created and or done a compensation analysis in the past couple of years? What do you currently pay? Are you paying individuals in a particular role? Are there any type of discrepancies? Does it meet the current and upcoming FLSA or the Fair Labor Standards Act minimum requirement? Quick hint, California salaried employees, in order to meet that exempt status, have to make at least $1,320 per week or $68,640 annually. And are you paying competitively? When was the last time you did that comp analysis or even a job analysis? Are you understanding what your employees are doing? And is it competitive compared to other companies that are doing a similar role that you're offering? So, what happens when you don't take those steps, and what are some of those consequences? So, we wanted to talk about wage compression. So, wage compression occurs when newer employees are paid nearly the same as longer tenured employees with more experience. Keyword, more experience. So, basically, there's an opposite of this, which is also not opposite, but there's another side of this called wage inversion, which happens when new hires are paid even more than seasoned employees. Both scenarios can harm, obviously, workplace culture, retention, and overall equity as well. So I wanted to give you two very basic examples. One focus, oh, I did not click the next slide. Apologies. So I wanted to give you two quick examples on what this entails. So let's talk about manufacturing. Manufacturing is an industry that's currently going through so many changes for so many reasons. So let's talk about a basic machine operator. So let's say you have a machine operator. Here's Christina at $24 an hour, and you have long tenured operators, 8 to 10 years, making only $25 an hour. So there's almost no pay gap in that example. So what's the consequence in this scenario? Long-term employees feel undervalued, unmotivated, and obviously can lead to decreased productivity and higher turnover, because what's going to happen? They're going to leave to a competitor to make that higher rate, because there's not that much disparity. And this happens because you continue, oh, we'll talk about it in the next slide, but there's been a pause on increasing mid-manager versus those new employees being hired. Let's talk about now wage inversion. Let's talk about a law firm. Really basic example. Let's say you hire a first-year associate and they're going to be offered $185,000 a year because you need to be competitive. That's how much these new attorneys are being offered. And you notice that you have attorneys 5 to 6 years of experience that have been now dedicated to your company for several years at only 178,000. So new hires are now actually making more than your seasoned mid-level managers. So what does this create? Again, resentment, turnover, and you lose mentorship, right? So many of these roles, and I want you to really think about this. Who is training your employees most of the time? Those star employees that have remained with you and been loyal to you and know your company and have a wealth of knowledge, they're not going to leave to simply make a little bit more money, which is not ideal for any business. So what causes wage compression? So there's a number of things that we should just be aware of as business leaders. So minimum wage increases very much causes wage compression. So when regulations require minimum wage increases for those certain pay rates, so think about those front of line employees for a basic term, mid or high level managers or employees are often overlooked, and those positions are not reevaluated to increase them, thus causing wage compression. Top labor market. So let's go back to COVID era, which nobody wants to, but let's think about that moment in time. So during times of worker shortages, which was happening all over because of COVID, employers had to offer really competitive starting wages to attract new hires. So if adjustments were made for existing employees, what happened? Those tenured employees were making less sometimes than new employees. Inconsistent or random compensation structures are probably the biggest risk. This is when you're really adjusting salaries or even hourly rates at an ad hoc approach. You're basically saying, Christina, I'm going to give you 3% because I like you, but Anu, I'm going to give you 5% because I really like you. Not ideal, especially for a company. Lack of I can't speak anymore. Lack of regular market analysis. So if employees fail to benchmark pay equity against industry or even regional standards, salaries can fall behind. What happens if they fall behind? Their companies may need to raise wages sharply, which is not ideal for budgets, right? In order to stay competitive without adjusting legacy employees at the same pace, again, creating that disparity. And lastly, financially struggling businesses. Organizations facing financial pressure may freeze or slow raises for current staff. At the same time, they still need to pay competitive salaries or hourly rates in order to attract new talent and to fill those positions, which again, creating compression and frustrating employees among existing employees as well. So how do you implement all this information that we're giving to you? We wanted to break this down with a step-by-step process and just making sure that you have as much information as possible when you go forth and do these changes. So first, Identify applicable laws. I know, easier said than done, but we're always here to help at identifying really what impacts you and what makes sense for your organization as well. Remember, we're doing not only what's compliant, but what's right for your team and your company. Create a salary structure if you don't have one to make sure that you have equity and you can audit those accordingly as well. Prepare for questions from current employees. Yes, employees will have questions, especially if they are like myself or any younger generations. I'm an older millennial, I'm going to date myself, but they will need to understand the why. So, super important for you to be prepared to answer those questions and really give them a clear piece of what is their total compensation and the why behind it. So begin including pay ranges on job posting. This is so simple, but make sure it's accurate to what you're doing. Very many times when I work with business leaders, this is what happens. We're paying them 25 to 30, but I really would like to pay them 35 if we find that ideal unicorn almost. If you can't afford it, if that's too high, make sure you're staying within a realistic pay range that's also within market, whether that's either at the minimum, mid, or max. Just make sure you identify where you need to fit within that pay range. Train hiring managers. This is such an understatement. Training your managers is so important in any type of compensation or equitable pay for two reasons. The majority of questions will be filtered through your mid managers. The majority of applicants will go through your mid managers. So make sure they understand what pay ranges exist, the why behind their pay ranges, how to answer those questions, and of course, ask for help. And lastly, inform employees of their rights. For example, as an employee of your company in the state of California, most places, depending on jurisdictions as well, I have a right to ask you, hey, if I apply for this job, what is a range? Is it above or equal to what I'm making? Are there other counterparts who are making more? And you don't have to give names, but you do have to provide them with specific ranges, for example. So make sure you understand what rights and responsibilities you have for the employees. So we wanted to leave you with some key takeaways. And this, first and foremost, pay transparency is here for the long haul. It's not going anywhere. It's going to continue changing and evolving. And we are sure it's going to impact more and more states, not because it's a nuisance, but because it's the right thing to do. Just creating that transparency when it comes to people's pay and livelihood, super important topic for any employees. Do the work. Now is the time to not to really look at what is achievable and attainable for you as an organization now versus ignoring it, because I promise you it will only get worse. And don't forget, you're not alone. You have us, we have these resources to give you, and we love this stuff. We geek out on all things HR and compensation as well.